Ladies and gentlemen, G. Edward Griffin, longtime author, longtime documentary maker, just a huge body of work, and like I said earlier, has probably one of the longest-running legacies in the truth movement, and even influenced Ron Paul in his book, The Manifesto, and certainly End the Fed. G. Edward Griffin, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I apologize for being tardy, but I've been on the road and my cell phone wasn't working, and so I just got home a few minutes ago, so I apologize. But here I am
very familiar with crap happens. So the first thing I wanted to get with you is obviously we just passed the 50th anniversary of the murder of JFK, and there's a big rumor out there. I like to call it a myth, and I want you to shed light on this, that JFK was working with the people to end the Fed, and he had this executive order 1110 on his desk that day he was shot, and it was going to end the Fed, and he was the people's person, and the big money interests in the Fed killed him to silence him. But from what I understand, when you actually examine Executive Order 11110, that it actually does not do anything to diminish the power of the Fed. Can you shed some more light on that? Because it's a big misconception in the truth and freedom community.
Yes, I'm glad to do that, although it's an unpopular thing to do. I'd rather, to stick with other areas that we don't have so much myth surrounding it, because it's hard to undo myths, But, I'm glad you used that word, a myth, because I think maybe most of your listeners are familiar with the story that JFK was assassinated partly because he signed an executive order which was to strip the power away from the Federal Reserve and, take the money back and issue it from the Treasury and so forth, and not pay interest to the banks. And of course, that's an appealing thought because everybody likes JFK. That's the Camelot image that we have of him, and the fact that he was assassinated certainly went a long way to throw public sympathy that way, and sort of made him a martyr. And so all of this fits together. We don't like the banks. We know what they're up to, what kind of criminality, and the idea that JFK might have been the opponent of the banks is kind of logical when you stand back. But as you said, I did check it out. I thought this is interesting. If it could be proved, that would be a very important fact. But I found out that it couldn't be proved. In fact, it was not based on any facts whatsoever. There was an executive order. And by the way, if anybody wants to check into this, I have published this on our website, all of the details and the references, because there's a lot of a lot of things to look up, like the various forms that executive order took. It was altered several times, and then finally rescinded, but not directly. It was rescinded as part of a bundle. It gets kind of complicated, and if somebody wants to really check into it and drill down, they'll find all of this on our website on freedomforceinternational.org, and it's in the section just called the issues under money and banking. You have to drill a little bit, but issues, money and banking, and then under the thing called the JFK myth. So all the references are there, but basically the story is that the executive order was definitely signed by JFK. But when you look at the circumstances of it, it's highly unlikely that he even read it. It was a very inconsequential executive order. It was merely transferring the power which the president had to authorize the issuance of limited quantities of Treasury notes. To transfer that power from the president to the Secretary of the Treasury, it was part of what they called a house cleaning bill or house cleaning executive order to get some of the stuff off of the president's desk with just a bunch of signatures that they never read anyway. It's housekeeping. It's something that has to be done, required by an old law, and so forth. And that's basically what it was. It was an old law that really goes back to the issuance of the greenbacks during the Civil War. And when the greenbacks were issued, part of the provision was that a certain number of them had to be kept in circulation, as a relatively small number. But that number had fallen below the threshold because people had lost them, or some of them had been destroyed. They had been returned to the Treasury, had to be replaced, and they didn't have enough on hand. So now the executive order was to comply with that old law, issue a few more of them, and that was it. Go on to the next executive order. It had nothing to do with taking the power away from the banks. And so that means that we need to go a little bit deeper. Would JFK have done that in the first place? Now, I'm a great fan of JFK, especially during the war. He stood up for America, and he was very strong against the threat of communism. But he certainly was not what you'd call an individualist. He really was quite in favor of international banking. You know, he was a graduate of the London School of Economics, which was the university that was funded by the Fabian Socialist Society. And all of the great socialists and collectivist leaders of the world seemed to graduate from there. That's what it was for. It's a kind of a think tank and university for people on the left. JFK is a graduate of that and had no problem with the teachings there. In some of his speeches and writings, which I have quoted elsewhere, he has said quite bluntly that he thought that it was a shame that the United States had so much gold compared to the rest of the world and so much wealth, and that it was necessary, he said, to bring that level of dominance down so that we could level the world and bring the United States down, raise the other countries, so we could have a level socialist playing field. He was all for that. He was all for the central bank. Everything that we complain about, JFK was more or less online with it. The only thing is that he didn't want the communists to do it. He felt that the United States government should do all of those things. And so he was a great patriot in the eyes of Americans. And that's where we start with all of this. I was surprised that anybody that would think that John F. Kennedy would take a stand against the banks, because he had been certainly one of their strong supporters.
Well, Mr. Griffin, I had a question for you, actually. You had referenced Executive Order 11110 with the greenback from Lincoln,
yes.
And there's been conspiracy theories referencing possibly that Lincoln's assassination was connected to his issuance of the greenback. Do you see any connection with that, or you think that's just conspiracy theorist fodder?
Well, you know, that's sort of a parallel issue, isn't it? I don't think that the evidence really is conclusive of that. I think he was assassinated because he stood in the way of what word should we put to it? The people in his cabinet, the ones that wanted to literally rape the South. They wanted to punish the South for the war. Lincoln was, he wanted to heal the wounds, and and bring everybody back as a same on the same playing field with a common culture, common political power. But some of the others in his government wanted to literally punish the South, and so there was a great conflict there. And Lincoln was calling for reconciliation. I think they had to get rid of him for that reason. He did issue greenbacks, and by the way, that was something that the banks did not like. Let's be clear on that, because it denied them the interest on those loans. And the time to assassinate Lincoln for that would have been long prior to after the end of the war, Right. And I've never seen any evidence hard evidence suggesting that the assassination was literally organized or financed by the banks. Although, I'm not stupid enough to think that they might not have done that. That's the kind of thing that keeps popping up in history all the time, and so forth. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I've never seen any hard evidence that was the primary motive for his assassination.
Sounds like a good old case of Kennedy, correlation is not causation.
Yeah, right. And again, it's one of those popular theories because the bankers are the people we love to hate, and so the more crimes we can find to pin on them, there's a tendency to say, yeah, they did that too. But they've got enough proven crimes. We don't have to pick the ones that there's no evidence for, because there are so many proven crimes out there with evidence galore that we've got plenty to keep ourselves busy.
Absolutely. And I always point personally, John F. Kennedy's seemed to be not really proactively pursuing involvement in Vietnam, and the fact that Johnson then coming into power immediately then, furthers involvement in Vietnam. Do you think at all military-industrial complex involvement in Kennedy, or is that something you stay away from as well?
Absolutely. I'm convinced that was one of the. See, a lot of people didn't like Kennedy, and a lot of people wanted him out of the way. The military-industrial complex, as you call it, certainly was one of those. He was standing in the way. They felt he was soft on communism. He was getting. In fact, he'd even called for an end to the CIA. Now, that's not something you do, and don't expect some problems. He was the president calling for the end of the CIA, or greatly, restricting its power. Well, anybody that knows the power that the CIA has must realize that you tweak the tail of the tiger when you do that. And so I'm sure that the CIA was involved. That's not just because of circumstantial evidence, but because of the testimony of so many people that is really quite easy to find. By the way, we got some of that on our website, too. And I think the mob was involved because he had turned against them. The Kennedys had made a deal with the Chicago mob that if they delivered the vote to him in Chicago, they'd leave him alone. Well, they didn't leave him alone. In fact, RFK became very aggressive against the mafia. And so they had a reason to get involved with the elimination of Kennedy, too. So there were a lot of people that joined forces, in my view. That's how I see the evidence. And it had really nothing to do with the banks at all.
Mr. Griffin, do you think that there's any water to the newest revelations from when Clinton had pushed for a new investigation or just a declassification of the Warren Commission's blacked out segments, which point to now the Secret Service or implement them in some way?
Well, I don't know anything about that. That's an interesting avenue. I find it hard to believe that the assassination could be pulled off without the cooperation of some people within the Secret Service. And
there was clearly a stand down.
The testimony from. Yeah, well, the question is, was it an official thing or was it just a rogue group? We know, for example, there were some people in the mob that testified afterwards that they operated a sort of a covert company. I've forgotten where it was located, but they actually issued false identification, and they created it for the CIA, and they created false pins, Secret Service pins, and special code numbers and everything that could be would be not recognizable as not the real thing. These guys walking around with the black suits and the sunglasses and the little earphone in their ear and the big thick sole shoes, they stand out pretty well as Secret Service guys, but nevertheless they all have a little pin, and that pin changes quite regularly so that the shape and the numbers and everything on it is like a changing of the password in the military. Who goes there? What's your password? Well, the pin changes. And so there was a group within the mob said that their job was to create imitation pins with the correct password and everything, or the code. And so there's this reason to believe that the Secret Service was involved, at least to the extent of some people. That doesn't mean that it was from the top down, but there's some evidence to suggest that.
In fact, they were heavily present during the autopsy, and they were the ones who had confiscated all pictures taken during the autopsy. And a recent book was just written called The Smoking Gun, which has been pointing to the lone image of a Secret Service member riding in the car directly behind Kennedy in the motorcade with an M6 or AR-15. And his name reappears again and again in the Warren Commission, actually, and even in those interviews, which are all now declassified because, again, that move made by the Clinton administration. But I find it interesting. Again, I didn't know anything about that whole issue until recently, so I was happy to hear your opinion on the Secret Service, certainly.
Well, yes, it was certainly, I guess the phrase they use is an inside job. There's no doubt in my mind about that. The evidence all points to that. And the most important thing, I think, is to know is that Oswald was framed. He was not the guy that pulled the trigger. The evidence shows that he was probably an undercover operative working for the FBI, I should say, that had penetrated into some of these Cuban groups to try and get information on them. And so that's why, he was identified with them. That it looks like he was really an agent and a patriotic guy, and they framed him and set him up, and he couldn't understand. He was waiting for them to come and get him out, and instead, of course, he was killed. And
his exact words was, he was the patsy.
He was the patsy, yeah. There's so much to that has been suppressed. So I think the important thing to know, and that's pretty provable, it's not even controversial anymore, to say that the investigation involved a lot of cover-up. Now, you could debate endlessly whether or not this or that fact was true or partially true or invented and so forth, but the fact that great forces were moved to cover up investigations and to hide information, that in itself, is a dead giveaway. There was something to hide at the highest level. What it was, we could debate about, but the fact is there was something to hide at the highest level, and that is enough to put a chill right down your back.
Yeah, that's always the case, and that's usually what frightens me, the implications of such a thing that rarely get fully realized by people. And you said at the beginning that it's a controversial stance to take to kind of quote unquote tarnish, I guess, the popularly held image of JFK. But I think it's really important to keep a realistic view of these people, just like it's important to keep a realistic view of the founding fathers, and not really mythologize them so much. I mean, I like to find the truth no matter where it takes me, and even if the truth that I find out bucks against my previously held beliefs, that is more important than upholding a lie. So that's why I wanted to get that information out there. And with that said, there's another myth. Oh, by the way, we're coming up on the break here in a few minutes. Are you going to be all right to do one more segment?
You bet.
Awesome, thank you. So another myth that's out there is the idea that there is a 100-year charter on the Federal Reserve, and that it's going to be up for vote by Congress to renew this charter, and let's push everybody to not have this renewed. But from what I understand, that does not exist, or at least it doesn't anymore. Can you shed some more light on that?
Yeah, that's easy to do. There was a time limit in the beginning, but since the Federal Reserve was passed into law, there have been over 100 amendments, and long ago that deadline was removed by congressional amendment to the Federal Reserve Charter. So originally the term was 100 years or until deleted by Congress or abolished by Congress. Then they changed it to it is now indefinite or until abolished by Congress. So a little change like that. So it's indefinite. That doesn't mean that Congress can't get rid of it, but it's not automatically going to expire in this year.
Absolutely, and to me, it's a shame that, like, as a community, the freedom community, we try to emphasize the importance of telling the truth, and we are concise in our research, and we're right in our research, and yet these things still come up. And I think the JFK is a big one, especially at this time. We are going to be coming up against the break here soon, but I definitely want to talk more with you about things like Bitcoin and. Leading into the break, what are we got about a minute. What are your initial thoughts on Bitcoin and its effect on the monopoly of the dollar?
Well, maybe we should just take that minute to finish off on the JFK myth. I think I can cover that in less than a minute. Yeah, he was supposed to have given a speech at Columbia University in which he said some things about he was going to reveal this great conspiracy and tell the American people all about the Federal Reserve and so forth. So I went to Columbia and I got their librarian on the phone, and I wanted a copy of the speech. Well, make a long story short, after a couple of weeks of research, it found out that he wasn't there on that particular day. They didn't have a copy of his speech. As a matter of fact, he has never given a speech at Columbia University, ever. And so I contacted the White House and asked where was the president on that day, and they said the president was in the White House and with a reception to several ambassadors, and they gave us a list. And so every time I tried to run this myth down, I found out that there was absolutely no basis to it.
Gotcha. Very enlightening. All right, well, we will be right back here live on the Big Plantation.
Mr. President, members of Congress, you've been making a lot of noise about taking our guns away. But you might want to review history. 1835, Gonzales, Texas Territory. The authorities wanted to confiscate the big gun that protected that colony. You know what the people said? Come and take it. Because they were willing to fight for their freedom and their guns. So are we.
Come and take it if you want it. Come and take it if you think you can. Come and take it, but I warn you, you'll have to pry it from my cold dead hands. We want the freedom that God gave us, so you best not cross that line. If you want this gun, you gotta come through us and take it.
One shot at a time. Just like Gonzales, we're keeping our guns.
At Damari Nolo Outfitters, we view the outdoors as our home, not a harsh wilderness. Our gear is chosen for adventure, not just in our backyard, but in the vast expanse of our amazing planet. Damari Nolo Outfitters carries the essential gear and tools you will need to live the empowering mindset of self-reliance. Our products are chosen especially for their durability and quality, and are carefully tested by our staff and associates. Our promise to you is we never offer any item for sale we don't use ourselves, so we can offer only what we know to be the best. Our online store makes it simple to browse through our high-quality lines of clothing, knives, tools, load carry gear, and accessories. We are committed to offering you the best American-made equipment on the market, a promise you'll see as we continually add new products. For more information about our products and blog posts to help you learn more about self-reliance and equipment, please visit www.damarinolo.com. That's DOMARI-NOLO.com. Damari Nolo, chosen for survival and adventure.
In every age, a technology is created that upends the foundations of society. The wheel, the printing press, the internet. Now, in a world sliding into financial chaos, a new technology is changing the way monetary systems work around the world. It is called BitCoin. BitCoin is a new form of money, controlled not by banks, governments, or corporations, but through mutual commerce between free individuals. To learn more, visit weusecoins.com.
Now I'm covered.
Now, for the first time, you can be covered. If you've been waiting to be covered in mandates, regulations, and new fees, the time is finally here. Sort of. So make some coffee.
I'm covered.
Approach life with reckless abandon. Kick your feet up.
I'm covered.
Because you're going to be in the waiting room for quite a while. But don't you worry your pretty little head off. First of all, it wouldn't be covered.
We're covered.
No, I said it would not be covered.
Now we're covered.
No, that's not... Yeah, I don't think you understood what I meant by covered earlier. It was a little bit ironic. Healthcare.gov is not responsible for fulfilling any of the expectations, mandates, legal requirements, hopes, or dreams of any users. Results may vary. Consult your Obamacare-approved doctor or pharmacist to find out if Obamacare is right for you. Current waiting lists to have your doctor chosen for you are unavailable and will remain so for the foreseeable future. Obamacare may cause wait times, a decline in healthcare quality, money loss, political activism, anger, despair, hopelessness, frustration, European envy, dependence, and nausea. If you discover that your premiums have gone up as a result of Obamacare, please note that the program is working as intended and refrain from complaining. Call your doctor if you experience anxiety for longer than 4 hours. If you wish to opt out of Obamacare for any reason, please start a multi-million-dollar business, join a union, or run for Congress.
You have reached the 911 emergency service. All operators are busy.
Oh God, please help me. He's got a knife.
You have reached the 911 emergency service. All operators are busy. Stay on the line for the next available emergency operator. You have reached the 911 emergency service. All operators are busy. Please stay on...
911 operator, what's your emergency, please? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Last year in the United States, thousands and thousands of 911 calls went unanswered. And if you call from a cell phone, there's no way to pinpoint where you are. Yet politicians like Dianne Feinstein call for more gun control. We have one question. Why do these politicians have armed bodyguards? Can't they just call 911?
Thanks for listening to FPRN. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook and Twitter. If you'd like to start your own show with FPRN, advertise with us, or donate to the network or to your favorite shows, check out our website at www.fprnradio.com.
And we are back live with the Big Plantation. We are joined by G. Edward Griffin. So, moving along from JFK, I wanted to get your opinion on Bitcoin because it's getting a lot of traction. Even Ben Bernanke has come out earlier this week and conceded that it has that Bitcoin, quote, may hold long-term promise. And more and more companies are using it. Now, given it did have a crash a few months back, but I mean, China's taken an intense interest in it lately. It's had a meteoric rise up to $811 is what my ticker is saying right now. What do you make of Bitcoin and its role on our move away from the dollar?
Well, first of all, I'm for anything that is independent of government or political manipulation, especially in the field of currency and monetary issues. So on that level, I like Bitcoin a lot because it's independent. It's the originators of it claim that it cannot be expanded. You cannot create it without a great deal of effort because you have to spend some time on the internet, and the total amount is supposedly limited. I like that feature too. It leaves a few questions open as to whether or not at some point in the future there might be some way to increase the number. My feeling is that if humans can create a currency that is has a cap on it, they can uncreate it also or change the cap. But there are those who disagree with me on that, and I hope they're right, because I think the idea that the total quantity of units cannot be expanded is a good thing. However, one could argue that maybe it should be expandable if it were based on something of intrinsic value so that the size of the money supply could expand with the economy. So maybe an absolute fix is not such a good thing compared to money system based on gold or silver, for example, that could expand with the increase in mining of gold and silver and so forth. A lot of arguments pro and con on it, but to answer your question, I like Bitcoin a lot. I should caution anybody who's looking at it for the long haul that it has one weakness in my view, and that is that it's not backed by something of intrinsic value. It's just intangible. It's out in cyberspace, and I suppose one could envision a time in the future where the powers that be could suddenly just decree that bitcoins are not valid, that they're a danger to the nation, that it's being used by criminals, it's being used by terrorists, or some other excuse they'll put on it to justify closing it down. They could close down the internet. Others will say, well, they couldn't do that because it's dispersed with so many different, different, what do they call them, junctures or nodules or something like that, so that it's not concentrated in one place. But I think that if you had something as sophisticated as the NSA working on it, they could find a way to close it down. Now, having said that, there's a way to close down gold and silver too. So there's no absolute safe repository in this very precarious world that we're living in. If you had all your investments tied up in gold and silver, which I think is a good idea too, now you have to worry about protecting it from theft or confiscation by rogue governments and that sort of thing. So no matter where you look, there's some kind of a cautionary principle there that there's no perfect escape from what's happening to the world's currencies right now. But I would say that bitcoins are on the right side of this event, and the fact that people are turning to bitcoins means that they're becoming aware of the problems with fiat currency. And that in itself, I think, is a good move. The more people that become aware of the problems with fiat currency and are turning to bitcoins as a way out, they're also going to be interested in gold and silver as a backed currency. And so I think that Bitcoins is playing a very positive role in the evolution of public awareness of our monetary problems today.
And I agree. And I think that one thing that's important to for a lot of people as far as the transition away from the dollar or transition to whatever is next is that when you think about competition, that's what Bitcoin is. It's competition of the dollar. I don't think anybody would be arguing that Bitcoin is to be the monolithic, universally used currency that the dollar is now. And I don't think any alternative currency would claim to want to take that position. But you could argue because obviously I don't know if I would call it backed by nothing because it does have a cap, but basically it's created through algorithms that computers specifically designed to create bitcoins called miners. These computers figure out algorithms, and through the figuring out of these algorithms, more bitcoins are released. But those algorithms get much, 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 much harder to where you need to invest more resources, more computing power into releasing those bitcoins. So as the cap of, I think it's 22 million bitcoins gets closer, it becomes harder and harder to mine them. So it does create that kind of scarcity.
Yeah, well, that's both a positive and a negative factor, depending on how you look at it. I think the positive factor is, right now at least, is stronger than the negative factor. The positive factor is that it's a block against inflation, and if they keep that cap at an absolute limit, what that will mean in the long term is that as more and more people use bitcoins, that the prices for everything will go down in terms of bitcoins, because they'll become more and more valuable as demand exceeds the supply. So nothing wrong with that, really. That means that those who save money in the form of bitcoins are going to be rewarded for their thriftiness, and nothing wrong with that. That's very healthy in a society.
And I agree. And as far as gold and silver, I had asked Ron Paul this before, and I was actually surprised that I didn't really receive an answer that I was hoping to answer. And that is in the documentary Freedom to Fascism, Ron Paul was talking to Aaron Russo and says that the Fed took all of our gold and claimed it, or a lot of our gold, and claimed it as collateral for the dollars that they print. And then, so when you consider the move away from detaching gold from the dollar, it seems that the gold has been seized by these different power centers. So to me, that says when you are arguing for a gold standard or to move back to a federally recognized gold-backed currency, what separates that from the fiat? Because obviously, the having a cap on the amount of gold is one thing, but then essentially it's going to be under control from the same people that control the fiat currency, which I see as being very dangerous.
Well, therein lies the problem. As long as the monetary system is controlled by the same people that are running the fiat system, there's no solution because those are the guys that are making the rules for their own benefit, and that does not include our benefit at all. So no matter what you come up with, what formula, as long as they're in control and as long as they can pass laws to force you to accept their monetary module, whatever it is, you lose. It's a rigged game. So. But I think that the deeper issue is that there's an assumption here that as long as gold is held by these international bankers, for the lack of a better way of describing them, that therefore gold is not a good thing to back our currency with, because the argument is, well, heck, they got all the gold, right? Why would we want to base a monetary system on something that is owned by the banks? Because that would give them power over us. And it's an appealing argument, but it really falls apart when you look at it, because you see there are two things going on here. These powers that be, let's call them that for the moment, they like to hold gold, and they're acquiring as much of it as they can for obvious reason. Yeah, they do own a lot of gold for the obvious reason that it's smart. These people aren't stupid. It's a storehouse of value, and while the purchasing power of the dollar and the yen and all the other monetary units, which are basically fiat, as those values go down, the ones who own the gold and the silver will survive, because that'll continue to go up. And so naturally they want to own as much of that gold as they can, but that doesn't mean they want to back a currency with it. That's a whole different issue, because, you see, banks can make money by lending money. That's the only way they really, in the long run, make money is collecting interest on loans. Well, if that means that their inventory, the thing they sell, is money. And if money is limited in quantity, as it would be if every bit of it had to be backed by gold or silver, that puts a big limit on the amount of money that they can loan. That's a limit on their interest payments. That's a limit on their profits. So they like a monetary system that is not limited, that they can create as much of it as they want, any time as they want, and loan it out and collect interest on it. So you see, there's a big difference between having a monetary system backed by gold, which they don't want because it cuts into their profits, and owning gold, which they do want because it gives them a protection against inflation.
Now, Mr. Griffin, do you think that the market is artificially pumping and dumping the price of precious metals like gold? Because I've spoken to people before, and in my own research have shown that silver traditionally should be more scarce, should be technically more valuable than gold, in that in order to ore silver, gold must first be present. And it seems that silver has far more relevant uses in our economy. So wouldn't that point to a fact that gold, even though traditionally always being money, as Dr. Paul has said, wouldn't that mean that there's some market manipulation happening right now, even with precious metals?
Well, to tell you the truth, in my view, it's so clear there is market manipulation of all precious metals. Gold and silver, the two big ones, for obvious reasons, because governments want their prices suppressed, because as long as nobody is, or not many people, are turning to gold or silver as an escape from the dollar, then the dollar looks pretty good. So they don't want people escaping from the dollar and putting investments in gold and silver. So they keep the governments have an interest in keeping the price artificially low. And the bullion banks, which are leasing gold, which they don't really have, which is that's how one of the ways that they control or manipulate the price. People, when they invest in gold today, most of them don't ever care to actually take possession of it. They just assume that whoever they bought it from is going to store it from them and be honest about it and put it in a vault in London or Zurich or New York. And if they tell them that they bought some gold, they believe that the gold is actually there. Well, in truth, the gold is not there. Most of it is not there. Only a small, little, tiny percentage of all the gold that's being bought and sold on the markets today is actually in existence. And so it's possible, if you don't have to deliver gold, you can sell it all day long and lower the price. I mean, you just... and that's what's happening. And it's been happening that way for a long, long time. People are flooding the market with what they call paper gold. It's not real gold at all. It's just contracts to deliver gold. And they're just hoping that nobody will ever call those contracts and ask for it to be delivered. When the day comes that starts to happen and people start saying, well, wait a minute, I want my gold. I don't want this piece of paper. I want it delivered to my door or to my vault. That's when the whole thing unwinds, and that's when probably these banks will call upon their buddies in Congress to pass a law to close down the gold market. It's a terrible market. It's going to ruin the country. Look what's happening. All these speculators out there. We got to close this market down. And so they'll use the power of politics to just close everything down to mask the fact that they have cheated everybody and they've sold gold that they don't have.
Well, to reiterate that part about the silver, just real quick, Heiss, do you think then in a pure economy, an restricted free market without manipulation, that silver could potentially be equal to value of gold?
Well, I've read some interesting analysis to that effect, and it's been convincing to me that that's true. But I have to say, I'm really not an expert on that. There are people that have spent major portions of their lives studying these markets and supply and demand and inventory figures and all that sort of thing, and they're the ones that have that conviction. And I'm just going to say that they've convinced me that it's true, but it's not my own research and my own knowledge that leads me to that. It's just that I have a great deal of confidence in the people that have come up with that conclusion.
Right.
And manipulations in the metal markets is always something that I've wondered about because, like you said, I think it's obvious that it's there, that it's obvious that they're artificially low, but I never understood how they were doing this or by what mechanism that they were doing this. So is it fair to say that because of paper gold, as you were saying, that in many ways the gold and silver markets kind of operate in a fractional reserve type way, the same way that loans from banks do, in that they're giving out and issuing more gold sales in the form of certificates than there is gold, the same way that they are issuing out loans than more loans than what they have in their vaults.
Exactly. That's the perfect analogy. It's fractional reserve banking, which everybody has talked about, has been understood for a long time. What people don't realize is that now we have fractional reserve gold marketing, and the fraction, believe it or not, in the gold and silver market is much smaller than in the field of banking. In the field of banking, it's been generally at around 10 to 1. In other words, banks could loan out 10 times more dollars than they actually have on their books. They create that extra 9 for every one. And so that's been a well-established ratio, 10 to 1. But my understanding of what's happened in the gold and silver market is the ratio has grown to about 100 to 1. For every 100 ounces of gold sold by the bullion banks or leased or whatever, pledged in a contract, there's only 1 ounce of gold actually in the vault. So it's even worse than with fractional reserve banking.
And with these trends, as far as suppressing the price of the metal markets and the effects that has on the value of dollars as tied to oil and things like that, I've seen a lot of people who have become so disillusioned with the steady decrease in the standard of living and in the increase in debt that they feel that it's just going to be this way forever. That there is no end. That this is there is a move to sustain just the steady decrease, and it's not going to happen where you have hyperinflation or a crash scenario, whether it be the derivatives bubble or the bond bubble. What do you feel is the end here? Like, do you think it can just continue like this forever, or do you think that there has to be a point where something does give and we end up with a dollar collapse scenario or a significant bubble bursting?
Well, I'm ambivalent on that very issue. I can see either scenario playing out in the future, and I imagine that if I were sitting on the Grand Council, these people who are deciding all of these things, I would probably say, gentlemen, let's wait and see how it goes. We could go either way. Let's see how it goes. We would prefer, this is my imagination, of course, I would say, we would prefer to let it just play out slowly without any great crises. Let the people get used to it little by little, because that way there'll be less chaos, less violence, and so forth. Absolutely. And in the end, we have total control. But if necessary, if things get out of hand, let the bubble burst, let there be blood in the streets, and then we can institute martial law, and then we can move quickly toward the same goal. Either way, let's just see how it plays out.
So we have a Skype caller for a question for you. We have Bill on the line. Bill, are you there? And keep in mind, we have 6.5 minutes till the break, so please try to be concise.
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, you are live.
Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, yes. It's wonderful talking to you. Your books and especially your video have been incredibly helpful. I teach college, and I actually use your video interview about the Federal Reserve in every time I teach American government. So, I definitely want these kids to know about the Federal Reserve, and your stuff is very helpful for that. So, thank you for that. First of all. Second of all, I wanted to ask you about if you have looked into the push for ending the Federal Reserve from the bottom up, using the Constitutional Tender Act and getting states to obey Article 1, Section 10, where they have to use gold and silver and aren't allowed to use Federal Reserve notes. I was wondering if you had looked into that at all.
Well, yes, I'm familiar with that, and frankly, I'm very impressed by that as an approach. I'm of the opinion that not one single approach will work. I think we need to push at all doors at the same time and build a grassroots pressure on Congress. We don't know which one may actually break through, but I like that bottom-up approach because it gets people involved, which is what we need. No matter what we do, if we don't have a lot of people out there, banging the drum for it, it's not going to happen. So I have a feeling that by the time we get that bottom-up approach going, at the same time somebody in Congress is going to call for maybe a constitutional amendment or something like that, and we can strike the beast from two different directions at once.
That sounds like a great idea.
Great question. All right, thanks for calling. Yeah, and that kind of was where I kind of wanted to take the conversation next is what do you see, Mr. Griffin, in terms of solutions? Because I watching your video from, God, I think it was in the 90s where you were given, your dissertation on Creature from Jekyll Island. You were saying that Congress is where this started and Congress is where this is going to end. And I like to think that that's possible, but with Congress is as inept as it is and such a benefactor from the Federal Reserve, I find it hard to believe that we're really going to find any relief from them. And what do you think? I mean, I totally agree with what you said as far as knocking on all doors and going in all directions. My personal belief is that we need to start looking into possible criminal investigations into these organizations.
Well, all of those things are good. It's hard to argue against any of them. And when you say that Congress is not going to budge, I think we have to agree that this Congress will not budge, and that's the crucial thing. Congress is, I believe, the source of the solution, but not this Congress. We have to replace those guys. These people are so corrupted by this power that they're not going to do what needs to be done. And so we have to back off one notch and start asking the question, how can we change those nameplates on those congressional doors? So that's where we have to start, and that's why I say that we have to bang the drum, get a lot of people active at the grassroots level, and build political pressure to change those names so that we have a different Congress. Then we have a chance of making some real advances.
Absolutely, and we're right up against the break. I wanted to squeeze in a quick question, and then hopefully we can go on if you have the time after the break. But I just wanted to ask what we could do as a society outside of, the gatekeepers or the Congress, as far as what, like Dr. Paul has been doing with Campaign for Liberty, what your view is on that, or his new book about homeschooling and the importance of family structure being built once again and pushed, and then homeschooling.
Well, all of those things are good, and I am glad that issue has come up because I think there's too much focus among our friends, too much focus on this single silver bullet approach, which usually means who you're going to vote for president. Too many people are thinking if we could just get the right person elected as president of the United States, that would take care of everything. And, of course, it won't. We have to attack this problem from every possible level. If a good man were ever elected as president, which is hard to imagine with the media and everything around us, but if it were to happen, he wouldn't be able to do very much because he would be surrounded by his enemies. We need to support him in Congress. We need to support him in the Senate. We need to support him in the media, the trade unions, and the educational centers. We have to change society, literally. And this means that it's not a quick fix. People are looking for a quick fix. It's not going to happen that way. It took 100 years to unwind the American Republic. I don't think it'll take 100 years to wind it back up again and then move beyond. But it's going to take probably a generation. So we have to have the long view of history. And we can't just attack it from one particular point of view and come up with just one strategy that, like this magic bullet, is just going to solve all of our problems. And that's why we have to attack this thing from across the board, and that's why we need an organization to do it, which is why I created Freedom Force International, because we need people at all levels of society to be tackling this problem at the same time.
Totally agreed. And we're coming up against the break, so if you can do one last plug for where can people find your work, where can people sign up and find out about Freedom Force International, that'd be great.
Well, okay, the website's very simple. It's freedomforceinternational.org. It's very simple. And that's a think tank. We have nothing to sell there. And when we come back, I'll tell you about our commercial site, where we got lots of books and videos and CDs and that kind of thing. But for the think tank side of it, it's freedomforceinternational.org.
All that and more with G. Edward Griffin on the other side of the break.
Big Plantation.
What's up? Big things happen when you let yourself go.
Tired of living in a violent society? If every citizen was armed, no one would be dumb enough to shoot people. It's exactly the ethos our founding fathers had when they wrote the Constitution and then changed it, which is what makes it sacred now. Come mingle with safety-minded people like you at the Liberty City Gun Club. Our nation is still the world leader in one thing: armaments. Nothing says excitement like a night out with a small caliber semi-automatic weapon. Get social at the Liberty City Gun Club.
Well, yeah, it's getting tough out there. Yeah, no doubt. I work in home invasions, mostly. Some murder, occasional rape, if she's hot, or really bitchy. And I'm a huge advocate of gun control, absolutely. Every time I kick in a door or smash a window, I face the possibility of being shot and killed. Allowing citizens to own guns creates a hostile work environment for me and my associates. No one should have to work under those conditions. I say make them all illegal, absolutely. I mean, I break the law for a living. I'm a professional, so it doesn't really bother me. No doubt. No doubt.
Your local violent criminals work hard and put their lives on the line every time they attempt to murder, rape, abduct, or assault a member of the citizenry. They desperately need your help. With your support, there may finally come a day when a violent criminal can have his way with you or someone you love without the fear, anxiety, and stress caused by knowing there's a possibility his victim might be armed. Please show your support by voting for stronger anti-gun legislation, because criminals prefer unarmed citizens.
Hi, I'm Steve.
I'm Irene.
I'm Lisa.
My name is Tom. I'm a graphic designer,
college freshman,
stay-at-home mom with a full-time job,
scholar on social policy, and a barista.
And I'm just like you.
I'm an Obama supporter.
I support President Obama.
But the president needs your help.
Our president can't launch into another war without you. And remember, we promise to support him no matter what.
Together, we can do it.
That's why we here at the Americans for Whatever Barack Obama Wants, Did You Know He's Friends with Jay-Z, have launched a Kickstarter campaign to fund World War III.
And America is dead-ass broke, so our goal is to raise $1.6 trillion on behalf of the U.S. government.
That's where you come in.
Even a small donation would make all the difference.
When I first saw the president speak in 2008, in a YouTube clip posted to my Facebook page, I knew he was going to be right all the time. So I support World War III and IV and any moon war the president may want to start.
I mean, there is no way that he or the cabal of corporate interests, spy agencies, and shadow bankers that tell him what to do would ever mislead us. A $25 donation will get you a piece of rubble from a war-torn Middle Eastern country kissed by Senator Lindsey Graham.
A $100 donation gets you a day pass to leave your local refugee camp.
You'll probably end up in a refugee camp, but it'll have free Wi-Fi.
So please, help us reach our goal of $1.6 trillion so we can make World War III a reality. Why? Because Obama.
Because Obama.
Do you have a group or organization founded on the principles of personal liberty, health freedom, or accountable government? We invite you to check out Same Side Entertainment. Same Side is a source for activists and liberty organizations to connect with well-known leaders in today's growing movement for sustainable living, personal liberty, and sovereignty issues. Same Side has a variety of keynote speakers, debate panels, interactive web presentations, musicians, and liberty-based entertainment, as well as services for web design, graphic design, video, and photography. Same Side can help customize your event by connecting you to the best of the liberty and political world while staying within your budget. Get connected with leaders in the liberty movement like Tom Woods, Kevin Gutzman, Jack Hunter, Robert Scott Bell, Bob Murphy, Michael Scheuer, John Bush, Jordan Page, Tatiana Moroz, and many more. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and our website at www.samesideentertainment.com. Again, that's www.samesideentertainment.com. Same Side Entertainment, connecting you with the education and resources you need.
Thanks for listening to FPRN. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook and Twitter. If you'd like to start your own show with FPRN, advertise with us, or donate to the network or to your favorite shows, check out our website at www.fprnradio.com.
The Big Plantation. Moses Flows, Mike Heist, Jamie Martin. Go get him, boys.
And we're back. And we are with legendary G. Edward Griffin. And before the break, Mr. Griffin, you were getting to some pretty important...
Oh, looks like we lost Moses. But, yeah, so where I kind of wanted to go is... You know, we're seeing a worldwide trend of moving away from the dollar, whether it's, the rise of Bitcoin here at home or, overseas countries like Iran and other countries, India, China, Russia, trading with each other, circumventing the dollars in currencies other than the dollars. So, what do you see that as what kind of effects do you see that having here at home, and will that have any effect on the minefield of economic bubbles that we have here at home, like the bond bubble or the student debt bubble?
Well, it certainly will have an impact on it. Exactly how much, it's hard to predict, but it's not going to be good. It's hard to predict how bad it's going to be or how fast it'll develop, but the forces are very clear. The American dollar has benefited tremendously for the past 5 or 6 decades from the fact that it was basically the reserve currency of the world. Everybody wanted it. It's not that it was valuable in itself, because everybody knew that it had nothing behind it in terms of gold or silver, nothing tangible, but everybody was willing to use it, which gave it its tremendous value. They were willing to use it because it was backed by the United States, which was the biggest economy in the world, the biggest military in the world. It was the moral and economic power of the world, and so everybody wanted to use the U.S. dollar. No matter how worthless it was, they could always pass it off to somebody else. And but now, as you've already pointed out, that's changing. More and more countries are questioning whether or not this is a good idea, and they're maneuvering as we speak to find some other currency to depend upon, because they have seen that America's politicians have had no self-discipline at all in issuing more and more money to bail out the banks and to build the welfare state and to purchase votes to keep the current system in power. And they know, these politicians know, because they do pretty much the same thing themselves. They know that can't last. It's going downhill. It's going to come to an end where the dollar will be very useless in terms of economic purchasing power. And so they're looking for some other way out. And when that happens, and it's already happening now, that means that other nations will stop taking our dollars. We keep creating these dollars by the billions and now the trillions. In one fell swoop, trillions of new dollars are created out of nothing by the Federal Reserve. They're loaned into existence through the banks, and then they flood through the economy, and that, of course, causes inflation. And Americans have been spared a lot of that because up until now, other countries have been willing to gobble up those dollars and use them as their currency. Little countries like Zimbabwe, for example, they can't conduct any realistic financial transactions in terms of the Zimbabwean dollar, and they don't. If they want to purchase real estate or go into a business venture or come into some kind of a investment contract of some kind, they have to use something other than Zimbabwean dollars, and so they rush out and gobble up American dollars. And and so forth. So that's the reason Americans have been spared the effect of inflation so much, because other nations have been willing to take those dollars. Well, now, okay, the point is that's coming to an end. These dollars are starting to come back now to the United States. Countries are thinking, like China in particular, they're thinking, well, what are we going to do with all these dollars? Well, maybe we ought to buy up something from America while we still can, while these dollars still buy something. And so the dollars are what they call the euro dollars, regardless of where they are in the world. They call them euro dollars. They are coming back to the United States, and so we see foreigners buying up our real estate, buying up stocks and bonds in our markets, stock markets, and they're buying up anything that's for sale, like land, politicians, whatever, refrigerators, cars, and so forth. And so this money is coming back, and as the quantity expands, the quantity of dollars continues to get bigger and bigger. Inflation is definitely in the future for all of us. Inflation, in some respects, it's making up for inflation we missed in the previous years. That's coming back now to haunt us. And I'm afraid
how long,
that
Mr. Griffin, do you think that they can keep interest rates artificially low with something like quantitative easing indefinite?
Well, they can keep it. They can keep it going as long as the dollar purchases anything. But when finally the dollar purchasing power gets to zero, then the end of the game has arrived. So
and I think we're seeing a monumental move there, because China just announced within this week that they are no longer going to be stockpiling U.S. dollars. They're not going to be stockpiling our debt anymore. So, with the continued QE and the deficit spending with the wars and all that stuff, there's no end in sight in the inflation. But now the facade that is built up over the trade gap between us and China is about to get popped, I think, because now we don't have all these dollars to give them to show for it, and it might increase the prices of goods coming in.
Well, Mr. Griffin just hit on this by stating something that's been a big fear of mine, which is the fact that instead they've forfeited the dollar's buying power and instead are buying assets of America, basically buying land. They own more of America now. They find that more suitable because they don't trust the dollar. And that's scary when you lay that against the current socialization of America and the new viewpoints that are being pushed on the American people via the media of people like Putin, not such a bad guy, human rights person, good dude, why? And, their connection to China.
Yeah. Well, you're quite right. Things are coming to a head rapidly here, and I'm afraid most of our fellow citizens are not ready for what's could be a very catastrophic year coming ahead. I don't know how much longer it can go. I'm very bad at predicting dates. I'm pretty good at predicting events. I know what's going to happen. It's just that I just don't know when it's going to happen.
So before the break, you were telling us that you were going to let us know about where to find your work and what you're currently worked on. So why don't you go ahead and fill us in with that?
Well, yeah, thank you for that, because we do have a commercial website. It's called realityzone.com. And that's where we grovel and we try and sell things. We sell books and recordings and all kinds of good information that we've tried to vet and make sure it's authentic and it's realistic and it's reliable. And we have about 100 different items. Some of the things on there are items that I have written or produced, but most of them are from other publishers and producers. And so anybody that really wants to know what's going on in the world can have a good time on realityzone.com. And one of the things that I urge people to do, if they want to see at least what's going on over here, how we evaluate current events, is to accept our free subscription to our weekly news service. It's called Unfiltered News. And so they can come to the Reality Zone website and look for Unfiltered News and enroll. It's free, and it goes out every week. And so there's a lot to be had over there at realityzone.com.
I didn't even know about that. I'll definitely be signing up for Unfiltered News Al and incorporating it into what we post on our news page. So, but I want to thank you for your time. I don't want to take up the entire show, but I definitely want to thank you for your time. I know it was on short notice. You basically just walked in the door taking this interview, but thank you for your time. Thank you for your contribution. I know it's been a huge inspiration, and your work goes back, God, over 40, 50 years. It's just, you're one of the longest standing freedom fighters that I can think of, and thank you for your contribution, and thank you for your time.
And please come back anytime,
Well, thank you.
Mr. Griffin, please.
All right, well, thank you. You keep up the good work, guys. Thank you so much.
You do the
Goodbye.
same. Thank you very much. G. Edward Griffin.